Hi, I'm Patty.
I'm Kim Michelle.
And I'm Jill. Welcome to our podcast. It's a great day to talk.
Because honestly, what day isn't a great day to talk?
So join us in our conversation.
A Great Day to Talk is brought to you by St. George Design, offering complete website design, social media management, search engine optimization, Google and Facebook ad management, and many other digital and print marketing services. stgeorgedesign.com. And by Richardson Brothers Custom Homes, third-generation builders who have been building custom homes in southern Utah for over 25 years. They will take your dream home from concept to completion. Contact richardsonbrothers.com.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of A Great Day to Talk. My name is Patty, and I'm here with my two friends, Jill and Kim Michelle. And today's episode is our Read Now, Talk Later episode, and it is later. So today we're going to be talking about the month of May's novel that we introduced a few weeks ago called Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And if you haven't read it, we won't spoil everything for you, but maybe we will entice you to want to read it. And if you have read it, hopefully you will share some of the information that we have or our attitudes surrounding this book, and we just want you to join our conversation. So welcome.
Yeah. Welcome, ladies. Hi, Kim Michelle.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Kim Michelle is completely fine.
Kim Michelle is completely fine. We're all completely fine. I am so excited about this book. I first listened to this book when it first came out, which, gosh, what is the copyright of this? Let's see, 2017. And then I listened to it again several months ago and then read it again. I really love this book. And just to give you all just a brief enticer or a little synopsis of the book, this is about a woman named Eleanor. She's 30 years old. She lives in Glasgow. And she has some quirks about her. She's very, very honest, very blunt. She always, when giving a compliment, always follows with a not a compliment.
In fact, you might have a hard time finding the compliment in the statement somewhere.
Yes, because you get
They're
so
a little
lost.
backhanded.
Yes, you get so lost in the fact that she said this nice thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, did she actually say that out loud? So it's about Eleanor and her life, and or in this period of time, and she meets a friend named Raymond at work, who then helps her along a path of discovery and exploration of her own life. And we learn a lot about her during this exploration, and some of the most of the things are completely heartbreaking and explain so much. So we hope that you guys, those of you that read, enjoyed it as much as we, and we're excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, so we are going to try something new today. And if you were on the live, if you listened last time to episode 5, when we talked about how to deal with things when sometimes they don't look the way you thought they were going to look, we're totally prepared that this may not look the way that we think it's going to look. However, we are going to be looking at comments that come in as you live stream them and try to see if we can answer those and share some of your comments as we go along here and see how that plays out for us. And if it doesn't look the way that we think it's going to, then I'm going to rant and you're going to...
I'll be passive aggressive.
Right, and then you're going to...
Passive aggressive.
Yeah, for sure. And then we're going to get over ourselves and then we're going to move to solution. It's all going to be good.
Yeah. We're going to try it out, and
we're going to rant for 8 minutes, right?
Right, 8 minutes. We'll set the timer and then we'll almost be done here. And there you go.
That's it.
Episode over.
Episode done and check. So, okay, ladies, where should we begin?
Why don't we talk about a few of the themes in this novel?
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest to me is endurance and perseverance. And a lot of that is around the early life of Eleanor and things that happened to her. And I think that the theme of perseverance and endurance is one that we really hope to teach our kids. I hope that I have done a good job with my kids in that, because life is hard. Life is hard, and figuring out how to get through the hard times and coming out on the other end is such an important skill.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it goes so much with a lot of the things that we've spoken about leading into this episode today. But being able to persevere when things don't look the way that you think they should, to be able to still continue to show up in the world, even when you're going through your own heartbreak and your own struggles. I think that that's an important thing for all of us to be able to learn. And sometimes it's just one day. We're just trying to get through one day.
Right.
You know, we're not dealing with the lifelong kinds of issues that Eleanor's had to deal with in her life. And if some of you reading this book might have been like, hey, I had to persevere through the first 130 pages of this book because I just wanted to shake her.
Right.
Or I couldn't relate to her at all because she's just so blunt.
Blunt, and just her social skills are so low.
Yeah,
And-
non-existent.
Right. And,
Low
and
is kind.
we learn why that
Yeah.
takes place. But yeah, my friend texted me and said, Eleanor Oliphant is not fine. She is not fine.
Right.
And in the end, she went, oh, I'm so glad I finished this book. This
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah. So in the beginning, one of the things that stands out to me is that she talks about her week and the way her week progresses, and then what she does on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that she's very lonely, and she doesn't have people in her life. She goes home from work. On her way home, she stops at the Metro or the small grocery, whatever it is, and purchases. She splurges on a frozen pizza.
Yep.
And then she gets 2 bottles of gin,
2 bottles of vodka.
2 bottles of vodka, and takes those home, and then drinks wine on Friday night, and then passes out on the couch, and then just drinks those bottles throughout the weekend.
Yep.
And waits for Monday.
And is just waiting for Monday.
And starts all over again.
And starts
So she
all
has
over
created a way for her to be able to function.
Her coping.
That's her coping strategy. And I know that for many of us that may seem like so bizarre.
And
but
not
I think
a coping strategy.
Right.
Well, it's not a healthy coping
Right.
strategy, but it
For
is a
sure.
coping strategy.
And I think if we can, one of the things that's so great about books, I think, is that there's always something for us to learn, or there's something for me to learn from every book that I read. And so even though that is not my coping strategy, I can absolutely guarantee that there are things that I do as a coping mechanism that are probably not healthy for me either.
Absolutely.
But they're things that I put into play when I feel like I'm up against it that then become my coping strategy. So just as I can see that in her and say, wow, that can't be a fun, pleasant way to live your life. There has
Right.
to be more for you than that.
Right.
It gives me an opportunity to be in self-reflection around, okay, well, take a look inward, not from judgment,
Right.
which she has plenty
Oh,
of.
she takes care of that, doesn't she?
Right. So she not only judges herself, she judges others
Yeah.
around her. And so she's not able to look inward without judging
Right.
You're right, Patty.
anything.
That's exactly right.
Well, and she's eccentric to her coworkers,
Yes.
and mostly because of her matter of fact and her super low social skills. And so she doesn't have friends at work,
Right.
and that therefore is alone on the weekends. And
Right.
yeah,
She does attempt to endure, and really basically is just living day to day.
Existing.
Yep, just day to day. And what a lonely existence that is. And then through this book, she has these experiences where she then meets Raymond, who's a new employee at work. and
Who comes with no judgment.
Towards her.
Zero
She has
judgment.
ton of judgment on him.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
poor guy. He can do look, sound, eat,
smell,
walk, all
because he
of that.
smokes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, she's so mad about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she, well, and really, endurance goes on the part of Raymond as well. It's
Yeah.
not just Eleanor who endures, it's Raymond and the barrage of comments that she makes towards him.
Why does he continue to foster this relationship, this friendship in a way?
Isn't that a really great question?
Yeah.
When we think about our friends, and for me, I like to think about how my friends stick around.
Right. My friends are also asking themselves that. Why do we endure?
No, they're not,
not?
asking that.
Are you
Well,
asking?
not when I'm sitting next to you.
Right.
I ask that. I never
Right,
ask
right.
that, actually.
No.
But you're too nice, Kim Michelle.
No, not really. But, you know, there's such beautiful things that I get back from every relationship. That's what makes it so puzzling in this particular situation, because what is Raymond getting back in that relationship right there?
Right.
Except that maybe he can see something for her that she can't yet see. And that's enough for him to be in that place that said, maybe somebody did this for me. Maybe somebody believed in me when I couldn't see it. And this is an opportunity for me to be able to give that to somebody here. Because one of the most powerful questions that I saw related to this book was, would you have been a friend to Eleanor? And I really sat with that, because you want, now that you know everything,
Right.
you want to be able to say, oh, yes, I'm a big enough person that I would be friends with her. And at the same time, we all have an Eleanor in our life,
Right.
or have had. And I think we get to then say, okay, how did I show up in that relationship? And I don't know, but I think it does go back to the question of grace that we talked about
Right.
in the last episode. And somebody had sent me they'd sent me, not me particularly, well, yes, I'm sure they sent it just to me, this
Kim
very
Michelle,
private,
of course
personal
they
message.
did.
But it said, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always.
Right.
And I just thought it's so perfect to the conversation we had around grace. And I think that Raymond is a perfect example of grace in being manifested
Right.
in this book, because he is kind time after time after time. And he doesn't know what her battle is,
No.
but he can understand and appreciate she's in one.
Right. And he endures through that.
And he continues to encourage her to do things like
Right.
when
let's go to lunch.
yeah, let's go to lunch. Why do I want?
Come to my mom's.
Yeah.
Why would I want to do
Why
that?
would I do that? Well, and then on the encounter when they meet a man who falls down, and immediately she's like, "Oh, he's probably drunk." And they go over, and he had a medical condition, and they follow him
Right.
to the hospital, and
Raymond?
Raymond's like, "We're going to the hospital," and she's like, "Why would we go to the hospital? Where are his people? Why am I
Right.
involved in this?" Where she has been not cared for like she should have been cared for, so she never learned to care for others. So that was, or care for herself, and that comes to the very beginning where she decides she's going to do some
Exploration.
and maintenance on herself.
Yeah. Right, Patty. And the thing about Raymond, it's not just with her. It's with Sammy, as we the gentleman's name, like you said. And it's also with his mom.
Right.
He was so kind and gentle and invites Eleanor over to meet his mom. And he's the same person at work
Throughout.
as he is at home with his mom, visiting his mom, as he is when he and Eleanor start to go to lunch, and as he is with the other coworkers. And that kind of person, I mean, the endurance that person has, and the persistence was really a touching thing to read about.
Well, and the one thing about Eleanor is she's very practical, minus the weekend.
Right.
But she's practical in her clothing. So she has like one outfit that she wears to work.
Yes.
She doesn't.
Very practical shoes.
Yes, everything is very practical for her. And I'm sure she's very plain. She hasn't had her hair done ever. She doesn't wear makeup. She isn't socially skilled. And he still, and he knows that his mom will show up with grace as well. And where some people might not take Eleanor home to meet their mother, she, he takes Eleanor home.
He's exactly right, because his mom is so lovely with Eleanor, and probably for the first time in Eleanor's life, she experiences a maternal role model that is actually loving and gracious and kind and isn't demanding anything from her, and
no judgment,
and really beautiful.
I'm gonna get back to Facebook if you don't mind.
I really did like his mom too, because of those very reasons, Michelle.
She hugged Eleanor, right?
She did.
And that, I don't know that Eleanor has had personal contact.
Well, that's one of the things that she says in her story, that when she's talking about how lonesome she is, when she finally starts to recognize that she's very lonesome, and she says that only 2 people have touched me in the last year, and those were people that I paid. I got a flu shot, and I can't remember exactly who the other one was, but she said the only people that I've had physical touch from are people that I have paid. And even then they had plastic disposable gloves on. Which when you think of the depth of that type of loneliness.
Well, minus abuse.
Minus the abuse that we learn about. Right? Right.
Yeah. And one of the comments on here from Scott is that maybe it's not about enduring, maybe it's about endearing. How awesome is that? Yeah.
That is a great comment.
Because that is exactly what happens in this process for her. Because she doesn't just endure. Things change for her, not just in the way she sees the rest of the world, but in the way she starts to see herself in the place in the rest of the world.
And she becomes endearing to
others.
And to us as readers.
Right.
Oh, we are rooting for her.
So do we get to jump to that section now? Are we
I do, but I want to talk about one theme we didn't talk about earlier, which is her resilience, but our brain's ability to protect itself. And in regard to Eleanor, she her brain protected herself from her childhood trauma and memories of her childhood trauma, and how amazing our brains are for that, and also can be confusing and cluttering, as well as we find out throughout the end of toward the end of the book, how her brain worked to protect her from her memories that she
needed to protect herself from.
She didn't want to be able to pull those memories up, and so it protected her from them.
Wow.
Patty, because that's the battle she was enduring, right?
Yeah.
She and that's how that was. She had a coping in the moment, but in the bigger scheme of things, she had to let all of that past be non-existent for her.
Right. Yeah, she had to
get through it. To the extent that she is having ongoing conversations with her mom, who continues to be a voice of condemnation and judgment, and reminding her that she'll never account to anything, and
no one's ever going to love you.
No one will ever love her.
And don't you think, Kim Michelle, that is where her backhanded comments all come from? Because that's the only experience she's ever known. Despite the fact that she had this very abusive relationship, she still reflects the things that she learned growing up.
Yeah.
Right, because she was 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she had 10 years. And we know now that childhood trauma can influence a child at infancy.
Yeah.
That
Early infancy.
well, and that again,
the brain changes. In fact, our brains will be changed before our conversation is
when
over.
we're done today.
Yeah.
That was another thing that in another podcast from
Yeah.
Brene Brown, because
Yeah, that's-
Jill and I love Brene Brown, but she had talked
Not
about
more than us.
No, well, no, I'm kidding. JK. No, she interviewed someone recently about it was Oprah and
A doctor,
Doctor,
that Oprah,
they-
and she,
they just wrote a book together.
I'm reading that book right now.
Right.
on childhood trauma, the ACEs score, and
Yeah.
it talks
Even
about
earlier
in gestation.
in gestation, people don't recognize that the baby hears, and even when they're brand new infants, and abuse and situations that are happening in the home, babies
Not
take
to
that
them,
in,
but around
right,
them.
around them. Babies take that in. They have no understanding of how or experience how to release that or how to be with that, and that trauma affects them.
especially when their neurons are connecting at
Yeah.
such a rapid rate.
Right. And so it's no wonder that Eleanor has the characteristics that she does. In fact, I have to think that considering what she experienced, I just am amazed that she is the functioning person that she
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Up, in the introduction of the book, the fact that she can do what
Can
she
get
does
to
and-
work.
yep.
And be completely alone.
And completely fine.
Yeah.
So
Fine.
Which means what, by the way?
that's what I think is sarcasm.
Well,
that was a nice enunciation.
Because it's expected.
Sarcasm.
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 Sarcasm. And we all know that fine is an F word.
Right.
Right.
Right. What does that look like?
Right.
What does that
oh,
mean?
how are you? I'm fine. In fact,
That's
the quote
right here.
on
Here it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here
Let's
it is.
hear it.
Right here on the
Yep.
book. Okay. So she said, let's see. She's talking about her touch, the scalp massage at the hairdressers, the flu jab I had last winter. The only time I experience touch is from people whom I'm paying, and they are almost always wearing disposable gloves at the time. I'm merely stating the facts. People don't like these facts, but I can't help that. If someone asks you how you are meant to say fine. You are not meant to say that you cried yourself to sleep last night because you hadn't spoken to another person for 2 consecutive days. Fine is what you say. She's very honest. So when she's reflecting, as she starts to go through this process of self-examination, she's so honest even with herself.
Yeah.
Well, and I think in her childhood, as abusive as it was, there were still so many rules of, what would you call it? Like things had to be fancy.
Yep,
You had to
everything-
eat, you had to eat this certain way.
Right.
And the food had to be this, or it was rubbish, or
Right. How you
all
looked.
the manners,
Yep.
looks, everything
Yeah.
was so
Even when the
particular.
neighbors described them, they always looked so
They were so well behaved.
yeah, so well behaved, and they were always always looked so
Right.
put together, you know.
Which we all know looks are deceiving. We never know what happens behind closed doors, which is why Kim Michelle's quote about you never know what battle someone's going through. So our only job here is to be kind to others.
Right.
Yeah.
So where do we lead with that? Where do we lead with this endurance piece? Where do we go? What is another powerful theme that stands out to you guys?
Well, there's such a social issue around foster kids who age out. And we know Eleanor Oliphant was a foster kid who aged out at 18, and they get set up in an apartment, and there's a social worker that comes by to check on her so often. And there you go. And I see sometimes in my classrooms, we see foster kids who haven't been adopted, and where do they spend their Christmases?
Right.
Or if they can't go back to their original families. And I think that is a social issue. We've got to figure out how to
A different path.
a different path.
Right.
That's just an idea around this book that I thought brought to mind for me. We also know one of our episodes was about the voices in our head, which that theme came from this book because Eleanor hears her mother's voice and talks to her mother and hears that judgment and condemnation, like you said, over and over. And we've talked about how we have those voices in our head, even well-intentioned.
Right.
I don't know. I know this month is Mental Health Month.
Yep.
And trauma creates mental health illness or mental illness.
Right.
And we need to be more aware of it
Yeah,
and
one of the
more
big
accepting and
factors.
get rid of stigma around being able to say, yes, I have this. This is what I'm doing. We would never suggest judgment around someone who, was born with genetic diabetes or developed diabetes at an older age because of their genetics or had
Eye conditions.
Yeah.
For example, eye conditions,
Oh,
that's
you wear
something that's-
glasses? Ooh,
Right,
don't
or-
tell anyone.
Well, and within my family, there's specific eye disorder that is passed down, and we would never say, "Oh no, you shouldn't take care of yourself. You should not do those drops every day to prevent blindness. You should not do that. You want to look perfect. You need to be perfect."
Yeah.
So,
Well, and even Eleanor equates loneliness with cancer, right? Nobody, it's like it's like that, right? Nobody wants to get near you. Nobody wants to talk about it.
right.
Nobody.
Right. I mean, especially in Utah, if you're not married by 35, what's wrong with you?
35.
30, 28, 26.
right.
Social
Right.
leper. But I definitely think that's changing a little bit with the age and marriage here in Utah. But it is a question. They're not married? What's that? Da, da, da.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really glad I got married super young.
Because now you're such a super young, cool grandma.
Totally. And I never,
Right.
no one ever
Well,
thought something was wrong with me because I
know.
didn't get married.
Yeah. Well,
And
then there's
nothing's
those of
wrong
us
with
that
anyone.
got married and divorced very early, so that's a stigma too.
Yeah.
But she definitely has. She has to have a tough constitution to endure what she's endured.
There's no doubt about that. And at the same time, she yearns for something different. I just don't think she knows how to create something different because she's never been taught any skills to create
Right.
that.
And Kim Michelle,
And then people start being introduced to her life that she starts to let in for whatever reason. And I think there's probably been people in her life before that were available to her, but she wasn't ready for them yet. And for whatever reason, this time she was ready to let some of them in. Raymond is one of them. Sam is one. And she, even though she's like, why would I hold his bag? And okay, I'll hold it, but I'm going to make sure I take his alcohol out and put it in my bag.
Because I imagine the hospital doesn't want
And the
this.
hospital won't want
right,
him
and you
to
mean
have
Sam
that.
as in the gentleman that
Yeah.
fell in the street?
Yes.
Right.
Thank
Sammy.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. Yeah. But even in that moment, right, when she's like, why would I want to do this? I don't want to do this. She does create a moment of connection with him when she's just with him and they're waiting for the ambulance to come. And it's with his sweater, kind of, right?
Yes.
She has a sense of him through his sweater. And later that comes back to her as a very special gift. But I think she starts to open up in a way that maybe she hasn't allowed before. And I think Raymond is the catalyst for that. But then there are other characters. There's him. There's Laura,
His
daughter.
daughter, his son.
Mm-hmm. There's her boss, who is, so gracious.
Surprisingly so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really surprisingly so. And even her coworkers begin to create a shift here when she creates kind of this shift. I believe energy attracts like energy. So when you are in the space of change and movement, you create the space for others to be in that place too, energetically.
Right.
And I think she has a moment of crisis where she is like, you know, she's going to end this now because
Right.
what is there left?
She's so
She's
lonely.
so lonely.
And so distraught.
Yeah.
And
so invisible,
invisible.
in her mind to the world. And the only voice she hears is the voice of her mother, continual condemnation. And so she chooses then that this is going to be the end of it. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And she's prepared for that. And then what happens?
Well, Raymond comes.
Yes.
Raymond shows
Raymond
up.
comes, but even before that, as she's planning this out and she goes to the store, the gentleman that
Yes.
she purchases her alcohol
Alcohol
from
from.
every week, she asks for more and he stops and pauses and says, "Are you okay?"
Are you okay?
And is in true concern for her. And that was, I mean, besides Raymond, I mean, her boss had been nice to her before and was such, she says about him when she gets hired all the years earlier, she says, I came in, I had a broken arm, I had black eye
And missing
and
teeth.
missing teeth.
Yeah.
And he
because-
probably felt sorry
and
for
he-
me, so he hired me.
Yeah. And in all reality, he may have felt sorry for her, but he wanted to help her too.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the gentleman at the grocery,
Yep.
same thing. And
And
then
and I imagine what she looked like, disheveled, and her eyes would have been fogged over.
right,
And
because she'd already been
yeah,
considering.
yeah.
Yeah. And it was a plan. It was a plan that she'd really kind of had in the back of her
Yep.
head for quite some time.
Well, at the beginning of the book, she talks about some of her coworkers, and Raymond hadn't started working there yet, and she rattled off a list of their names and said, as she overheard them talking about how weird she was, but she said, I don't have very many people in my life, but I imagine my coworkers would miss me if I had been gone for a few days. It'd be a few days, and
Before
then
they noticed.
Before they noticed,
Right.
and then they would come to my apartment. They'd have to get my address out of the human resources file, and then come find me and probably be overwhelmed by the smell of
Yeah.
my dead body.
She'd already thought that all the
Yeah,
way through.
clear from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then when Raymond does show up at her house, Patty, and bangs on the door and she's just barely, she's in a fog.
Right.
It's been days and she is completely out of it. And he comes in and finds her in such a mess. And then she doesn't
Wake
have
up.
she doesn't wake up, but and has no memory until probably
It's a
days
couple-
later.
Yeah, it's a few days.
And he is there taking care of her and has cleaned her house and has cleaned her sheets. And when he walks into the room, she's so surprised that someone is there
yeah.
helping her.
And she had no idea for however many days he'd been there.
And I really think that gesture right there is what starts the ball rolling for her when she decides that she's going to
Get help.
reflect on what she listens to Raymond. She listens to what he has to say.
Which is kind of what we talked about last week as well. You listened to your brother.
Right. Raymond
And-
definitely showed up in grace for
Yeah.
her too. Yeah,
And
like
so-
Todd did for me.
Sometimes it takes the right person at the right time
Yes.
for people to go, okay, now I hear you. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
She was
Change is
definitely
hard.
rock bottom, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I love that section when he is just she's when I wake again, I'm laying on my sofa, texture under my hands felt rough, strange, and it took me a few minutes to realize that I was covered with towels rather than blankets. I lay still and slowly appraised my situation. I was warm. My head was pounding. My guts were filled with a stabbing pain, which pulsed regularly like blood. I opened my mouth and heard the flesh and gums peel apart like orange segments being separated. I was wearing my yellow nightdress. So he had come in and cleaned her up, and he had towels on her because he was washing her bedding. And then he made this bed for her, and she talks about how climbing into this bed was so cozy and safe and comfortable for her. And I can imagine that's probably the first time she's felt enveloped like that.
Yeah.
At her most vulnerable state.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Even in all the homes that she
Had lived in. Well,
Yeah.
they always, whenever she got upset in the foster home she lived in, they would call her caseworker, and the caseworker would come and remove her. She had such a story, and I think that it prohibited a lot of people from really taking her in.
Well, she wasn't ever in a place long enough too, and nobody
Took the time
to
to get
to know her. And
I think it's because of that safe place that Raymond kind of created for her, that she then is in, all right, I'm going to investigate then what really did happen, what really went on here.
what happened in my childhood? She never read the reports. She never wanted to find out what happened to her. And then as she was going in her therapy, she decided to do that.
investigate that.
And I want to read one little tiny thing, Jill. She said, just reflecting back on the voice in her head, she, after therapy, but before she found out what had happened to her, so she's still in therapy, she said, the voice in my own head, my own voice, was actually quite sensible and rational. I'd begun to realize it was my mummy's voice that had done all the judging and encouraged me to do so too, as she was also judged a lot of people.
Yeah.
I was getting to quite like my own voice, my own thoughts. I wanted more of them. They made me feel good, calm even. They made me feel like me, which she had never felt. Ever. She didn't even know who she was.
Right. And during her time away from work, when she's healing from this experience, the exploration that she was able to do and that she did because she had the time was she learned, she was just so open to hearing it. And like you mentioned before, Kim Michelle, like hearing it from someone that at the right time is what happened for her.
You're right, Jill.
Another time it wouldn't have worked.
And
for her.
here's always the takeaway, right? We hear those voices in our head all the time from an influential person in our life, whether it's a parent or a teacher or whatever, a coach, whatever. We hear those. It could have been ourselves when we were little. We hear those same voices in our heads when we get up against it, telling us that we can't or we're not good enough or whatever. We get to take the same lesson. It's not the same. I get that. I totally understand
Oh, for
that.
sure.
And at the same time, there's something of value to take into our lives from Eleanor's life here. Our life doesn't have to look like that in order for us to really create value from that and say, okay, is that my authentic voice that's speaking to me right now? Or is that somebody else's voice that I'm giving my power to? Because if it's somebody else's voice I'm giving my power to, stop it.
Absolutely.
That's right, Kim Michelle.
Unless that voice is saying you are a total badass rock star,
Right.
then just stop it.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree, Kim Michelle.
Kim Michelle, you are a total badass rock star.
I'm listening to that voice, Patty.
So here's my question. We've come to where this time period that she's home in, this exploration that she's been going through. Do we tell what happened to her? Do we want our
No, I
friends-
think we do because
Should
well,
I read the
maybe I shouldn't be the one that makes the decision on this. I think we do because just like I said earlier, I read a lot of the
right,
comments and there seemed to be some genuine confusion
right.
about kind of what happened here. So I think we should.
So should I read these two or just the one? The two articles.
Do whatever your
Maybe-
voice is saying you should do,
My
Jill.
voice is saying, okay, so what we find out is that when Eleanor was 10, a huge tragedy happened in her family. This is a newspaper article dated August 5th, 1997. The title or the lead is Pretty Bad or Pretty But Deadly kitty killer fooled us all, the neighbors say. Killer mom, Sharon Smith, Pitchard, 29, has been living in a quiet Maida street for the last 2 years, neighbors said, before deliberately starting the fire that ended in tragedy. She was such a pretty young woman. She had us all fooled, said a neighbor who did not wish to be named. Her little ones were always properly turned out. They spoke so nice. Everybody said what lovely manners they had, he told reporters. As time went on, you could tell something wasn't right, though. The kitties always seemed terrified of her. Sometimes they had bruises, and people heard a lot of crying in the house. She'd go out a lot. We just assumed there was a babysitter. But looking back on it, one time I was talking to the older girl. She was only 9 or 10, I'd say, and the mom shot her such a look she started to shake like a little dog. I dread to think what went on in there behind closed doors. Police confirmed yesterday that the fatal blaze at the property had been started deliberately. A child, to age 10, who cannot be named for legal reasons, remains in the hospital in critical condition. So Eleanor is reading this article because Raymond has found it for her to help her understand her past. The next article reads, London Evening Standard, September 28, 1997. Maida Val murder latest. 2 dead. Plunky orphan recovers. Police confirmed today that the bodies recovered from the scene of last week's Maida Val house fire belonged to Sharon Smith, 29, and her youngest daughter, Marianne, 4. Her eldest child, Eleanor, 10, was released today from the hospital after making what doctors described as a miraculous recovery from third-degree burns and smoke inhalation. The spokesman confirmed that 29-year-old Smith started the fire deliberately and died at the scene as a result of smoke inhalation as she fled the property. Tests on both children revealed that a sedative had been administered and provided evidence that they had been physically restrained. Our reporter understands that Eleanor Smith initially managed to free herself and escape the blaze. Neighbors then reported seeing the badly injured 10-year-old re-enter the house before emergency services arrived. Firefighters allegedly found her attempt to open the locked wardrobe in an upstairs bedroom. The body of her 4-year-old sister was recovered inside. Police have been unable to trace any living relatives of the child who is being cared for by social services. And that was Eleanor's
story.
Yeah.
That is the trauma that led to the voices in her head, that led to her foster care, that led to her loneliness, that led to her
isolation.
Yeah. And so she'd blocked all of that out. And the conversations she continues to have throughout the book that she's having
with
her mom, those are in her head. Those are the conversations that she continues to hear, the words of her mother speaking to her, reaffirming that she will be nothing, that she'll never be loved, that she'll never be amount to anything. And that's what had been keeping her where she was. So that's why it's so powerful, the passage Patty reads, where she says, my voice is actually, I like it. I like it.
It's reasonable. It's rational.
It's rational. And in her session with her therapist towards the end of the book, she says, I'm going to tell Mommy that it's time for her to go.
Right.
And she, in fact, does do that at the end of the book. That's why, even with everything that goes on here, it really is about triumph. It really is.
Well, and endurance and perseverance, and like Scott said, endearing.
Yeah.
And you just can't help but root for Eleanor. And I just loved her quirkiness. It made me laugh.
Right.
Too. So it sounds like a super sad book.
I know.
But it's really not. It's really powerful
it's
and
hard
it's worth the read.
Imagine it's not hysterical because we've been hysterical this whole show. No,
Michelle, not me.
So I think it's time to introduce our book for next. We've got a nice summer read.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Very different, but if you haven't read this book, we still encourage you to read it.
And thank you, Eleanor, for teaching me.
Yeah.
And thank you, Gail Honeyman, the author.
Yeah.
For
the most sold book in 2018 in the UK. The most popular sold book in 2018.
Yeah. Nice.
So this month's book for Read Now, Talk Later is by Fannie Flagg. She's the author of Fried Green Tomatoes. This book is called The Whole Town's Talking, and it's just a fantastic book, a little slice of Americana that is delightful and touching and lifts you and breaks your heart and brings you back up again. It's a perfect summer read. So we hope you guys will take the time to read this month and join us at the end of June when I may be in Maine when we have this conversation.
Yeah.
So
you will be remote.
I will be remote. I'm so excited to try that. And we really hope you guys enjoy it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we blue bowling?
Blue bowling.
Okay,
because
go
the
ahead.
nudge from all of us this week is get the book and start reading it
and enjoy it.
Yeah,
that's my.
You
nudge.
must enjoy it. I mean, that's a given. If you're not, then you there's no option.
Right.
You must enjoy it.
You'll still be our friend. You'll still be our friend.
Oh, of course, that's a given.
Okay.
Well, we all have different likes and
Patty.
interests, but. Okay. I love talking about Eleanor Oliphant, but I'm super excited about the Fannie Flagg book because I haven't read it.
It's so easy. You just
I
fall
bought it.
right into it.
Yes,
It's really
it is.
Yeah.
It picks you up and takes you right along.
It's really
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a perfect summer read.
Yep.
It really
Awesome.
is. Yeah.
Okay, what did you pick?
What surprised me the most this week, and we so I teach high school. Jill and I teach high school, and today was graduation.
Woohoo!
And
congratulations, kiddos.
Yes, and our graduation was actually on our football field, which normally it's in
the Smith Arena at DSU.
Yeah.
Here at DSU.
And we had it out on the football field. The stands were completely packed. And it was overcast, so probably for the first 45 minutes, it was really nice. Then the sun came out and it got a little bit hot. We were done in an hour and 17 minutes. And I'm not saying that we needed to rush the graduation, but it was enough.
It was perfect.
It was perfect. And so it surprised me that we were done 15 minutes earlier than we predicted. I love high-fiving the kiddos on the way in. That was so fun. It just surprised me how great the venue was for our graduation.
It was really special.
Because it was different than we've had in the 26 years I've taught. Yes. And having it on our campus was wonderful. And I kind of hope we do that again.
I really enjoyed it
I've heard that I saw Pine Views was on the field, and the same thing, the best ever, and that they hope it is done that way. Yeah.
It was just it was wonderful. It was like being at home with the kids.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Okay, so mine, let's see. What did I overcome this week? Well, I overcame and finished out the school year on a strong note. We survived a year that was the craziest year that I can even imagine or think of in any of the 23 years. We taught with masks on. We had our kids back, and we did it. We did it. And we did it well.
Yeah.
We did it well.
Yeah.
And props to Washington County School District, honestly, for making sure the kids were in
our next sponsor
school. Right. Right. But for them to make sure that it was face-to-face if the kids could and wanted to, because I am a supporter of that. Learning occurs face-to-face in a better than if it's online.
Well,
only.
it certainly is in high school, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. For high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Hey,
mine is what I liked most about the week. So if you didn't see this, then I'm going to encourage you to go on to my Facebook page, and maybe I'll post it on A Great Day to Talk. But there's a little video on there. So Scott's birthday is later in the month. So June is a huge month for us.
Birthdays
it's my
and
birthday,
an anniversary.
It's Scott's birthday. It's our anniversary, our 40th anniversary next week. It's my son's birthday. It's my other son's birthday, the very last day of May. It's Father's Day.
Oh
yeah,
my
it's
gosh,
like
wow.
we have to plan for it like it's Christmas for the month of June. But anyway, so our kids, Scott loves to work in the yard, and we're getting older. Some people.
What?
Yeah.
Not you, Kim Michelle.
Well, not me, but he is.
Maybe Scott.
Yeah, he is. So
sorry, Scott.
So they got together and they gave him his birthday present early. And it is the most amazing thing. It is a motorized wheelbarrow. And so they came and they put it all together and they gave it to him early. And he takes this little running jaunt around with it. It's adorable.
I love it.
It
It's
is
so great.
adorable.
Yes,
so
it
I'm
is.
going to post it on there, and all of you get to say, "You're right. This is so adorable."
It was fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to put it on there for you.
Cool. Love it.
Thank you so much for watching with us and following along. Those of you that have made comments on Facebook, we appreciate it.
And I appreciate you, ladies.
I appreciate
Yeah.
Eleanor.
Love you.
Yeah, love you, friends.
Love you.
Okay,
See you next
bye.
week.
Thanks for listening to It's a Great Day to Talk. Be sure to follow and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform.
And until next week,
Get out there and talk.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.